In the previous part, Lim's vacation days came to an end and his team was assigned a mission to eradicate some ogres. Lim decided to use this time to test out his team members to see how ready they were for the first disaster. First, he sent Wang into the front line to get beaten up by some ogres, which to his surprise Wang was holding up pretty well. Afterwards, he gave Lily 1 minute to kill all of the ogres present, and he promised that if she could do it, he would get her a combo meal. Lily missed the mark by 5 seconds, so Lim retracted his previous offer and said he would only get her a burger. This left Lily devastated. After the mission, Lim took another vacation to send his grand plan into motion. He disguised himself as a magician from the Gaia continent to warn the hunters about the upcoming disaster. Before we get on to the video, do me a favor and hit the like button, it greatly helps out the channel. Now back to the video. The other hunters present were in a state of confusion. They stared at each other questioning who Lim was, and why he was speaking a language they have never heard of before. 2 hunters faced each other, questioning if Lim really did come out of the portal. Lim quietly observed the confused hunters, then suddenly he lifted his staff in the air, and as he infused mana into the staff began to glow. The staff was glowing so bright that some of the hunters had to shield their eyes from the light. A hunter with a shield made his way to the front and he took a defensive stance, and he questioned if Lim was going to attack them. Lim spoke, expressing that the hunters shouldn't be alarmed. The hunters were taken aback, and they questioned why they could suddenly understand Lim. Lim explained to the hunters that he just used translation magic, and knowing that they could now understand him, he introduced himself again as Aximus, a magician from the Gaia continent. He asked the hunters to listen carefully to what he was about to say. Then he turned his gaze to Lily and he gave the signal. Lily quickly recognized the signal, and she activated a shield that flew them into the sky. While in the air, Lim shouted that he is here to warn the people of this world. The hunters looked up in amazement. They accepted the fact that Lim was a wizard like he claimed, but questioned what he meant by warning them. Lim turned their attention to the rainbow, and he explained to them that the rainbow is the sign of doom, and once all the colors of the rainbow disappears, a calamity that opens hundreds of gates to hell will befall this world. As he was explaining, Lim lifted his hand, which Lily recognized as the second signal, so she created more shields, and she started raining down many fireballs. This really set the scene for Lim. He lifted both of his hands in the air, and in a serious tone he expressed that monsters and demons will overrun the land and the sky. Nowhere will be safe, the living will die, and the dead will rise, and to stop this disaster he explained that everyone must band together and prepare quickly before all the colors of the rainbow disappeared. The hunters, and some law enforcement that had arrived, couldn't help but watch Lim's performance unfold before their eyes. With their gaze still towards the sky, and in a confused state, they questioned if the rainbow was really counting down to a disaster. Lim was getting the reaction he wanted, so he signaled for Lily to deactivate the shields and her ability, and they dropped to the ground. The special mask makes his voice sound more believable, and the sage's robe gives off an aura that makes people notice him. Finally, his magic wand, which was just a glow stick, but it helped set the scene. One of the law enforcement approached Lim questioning how they can avoid this disaster, and Lim quickly got back to his acting. He lowered his head, and in a serious tone he explained to the officer that the disaster cannot be avoided. The only thing they can do is minimize the damages. Suddenly his gaze intensified, and with intensity he asked to meet the king of the world, so he could report the details to him. Law enforcement took Lim and Lily to the Blue House interrogation room, and in the long hours they waited, Lily fell asleep. Sometime later a man entered the interrogation room. This man was Ju Sang-wook, the Hunter Cooperation Team's leader. He approached the table, then he placed his briefcase on the table. Afterwards he reached into the briefcase and while taking out some files, he expressed, in a skeptical tone, that he has never heard of anything like magicians from another dimension. Lim told Sang-wook that it's understandable that they are suspicious, but they shouldn't be since he is here to warn them of a disaster. He expressed that he is no threat since they took away his wand, and he asked to speak to the king. Sang-wook bought into Lim's acting, however he was still suspicious. He took a seat, and in a skeptical tone he questioned how Lim can be so sure that he wasn't the king. Lim motioned his hand forward, expressing that he can read the destinies of people, but only bits of it. This left Sang-wook scratching his head in confusion. He was still suspicious, so he asked Lim if he had any proof of his abilities. Lim's body started emitting a mysterious aura, and in an ominous tone, he explained that he can't see the destinies of everyone. He can only see a bit of the course of events that will leave a mark on history or of people with great destinies. For example, Sang-wook, who isn't a king right now, but in the near future he will seek to be king. This surprised Sang-wook. He sprung from his seat questioning how Lim found this out. Lim knows because in his previous life Sang-wook ran for president, and he was also a hunter judge who did not tolerate crimes committed by hunters. His gaze intensified and he told Sang-wook that he couldn't say anymore since that is all he can see. Sang-wook was still in a state of confusion and he didn't know how to respond. Suddenly a worker entered the interrogation room. This snapped Sang-wook out of his confusion. He turned his attention to this person, and they reported that the president wanted to meet with Lim in person. After the report, Sang-wook gave Lim his wand, and he expressed that he will take them to see the king. Lim accepted his wand with a pleasant smile, and he thanked Sang-wook. As they made their way through the Blue House, Lim made some observations. The current Blue House was rebuilt a few years ago. During the first gate, a gate appeared on top of the Blue House building, and the monsters that came out of the gate went on a rampage, and they leveled the Blue House building. As a result, the president and most of the members of parliament who were in the Blue House building at the time were killed. The chaos that resulted was only barely resolved after a new president was elected. Lim couldn't help but notice that because of its durability, the new Blue House looks like a military facility. Sang-wook suddenly stopped in front of Lim and Lily, and he announced that they had arrived. Inside the president's office, guards stood facing each other, and the president sat on his chair with a guard to his left. Sang-wook knocked on the door and they were told to enter. After Lim entered, the president introduced himself to Lim in a formal tone, and he questioned if it's really true that Lim and Lily are from another dimension. Lim bowed and he introduced himself as Aximus, a magician from the Gaia continent. Lily followed suit, and she introduced herself, but her Korean was still shaky, so Lim asked the president to excuse his assistant's clumsy translation magic. The president expressed that this wasn't a problem, and he asked them to sit in the chair in front of them. Lim and Lily approached the chairs, but before they sat down, Lim observed the chairs, and he expressed that the chairs seemed weird. The president expressed that Lim shouldn't be worried, and he explained that the chair is a device that they use for detecting lies. He says if Lim answers with a lie to any of his questions, then he will know right away. Lim took a seat comfortably, and with a confident smile he chuckled, saying the president should be the one on the chair. This took the president by surprise, and he questioned what Lim was saying with his statement. Lim explained that he was just expressing that they have nothing to hide, and since he was comfortable, he asked the president to ask him the questions. The president didn't waste a single second. He quickly asked Lim if he truly came from the Gaia continent. Lim replied with a yes, and the lie detector wasn't set off. The president then asked if the story about the disaster is true, and Lim answered saying the disaster story is true, and that they came here to warn them about the disaster. He also told them to ask him most of the questions since his assistant doesn't know much about the disaster. Sometime later the questioning was done. Lily didn't understand half of the questions, and Lim trained in martial arts so he can control his breathing, pulse, and sweat, so if he wanted to lie, a lie detector test would be useless. The president stood up from his chair, and he asked the workers in the room to remove the wires that were hooked up to Lim's body, and afterwards he asked them to leave. After all of the wires were gone from their bodies, both Lim and Lily stood up. The president approached Lim, and he apologized for continuing to doubt Lim. He expressed that it's nothing personal, it's just the nature of the situation. Lim expressed that the president had nothing to worry about, since he would have done the same thing. Before Lim and Lily could leave, the president stopped them and he asked a personal question. He asked Lim if he could help him flee to the Gaia continent. This question took Lim by surprise, and he questioned if he heard correctly. With a disturbing look on his face and a panicked tone, the president expressed that it must be safe in the Gaia continent, since Lim came to another world to warn others, so Lim should take him to the Gaia continent. This angered Lim, and he questioned if a king is going to abandon his people and flee. The president was now in a state of panic. He expressed to Lim that he is not a king. He said he is just a person who happened to sit in the king's seat. He expressed that he will give Lim whatever he wants if he takes him to the Gaia continent. In a gloomy demeanor, he told Lim that he was sick of this dangerous land where he doesn't know when he is going to die. He motioned his hand towards the guard that was wearing a mask, and he expressed that he would do anything if Lim took him, his family, and this guard to the Gaia continent. Lim was taken aback. He didn't expect the president to be this type of person. He quickly grabbed Lily's hand, and in a disappointed tone he expressed that he has misjudged the president, so he will be heading back now. The president stopped Lim once more, and he reminded him that he could get anything he wanted. Lim didn't even bother to look at the president, and with his back turned he rejected the president's offer. The guard next to the president, Kim Soo-ho, the first awakened giant, took off his mask, and he crushed it in his hands. Suddenly his aura began to fill the room. Lim notices, but before he could react, Kim had already closed the distance between them. With a close-up look at Kim's face, Lim couldn't help but start giggling. This confused Kim, and he questioned why Lim was suddenly laughing. Lim replied with a question. He asked Kim how long he plans on playing this joke. He expressed that Kim must be the real king. This further surprised Kim. He deactivated his ability, questioning how Lim figured him out. Lim smiled confidently, and in a confident tone he made up some bullshit about being able to see the large star of fate that Kim has, when in reality he knows Kim was the hero who brought order to South Korea, which was in chaos after the first gate. As soon as Kim awakened his ability, he mobilized law enforcement to protect the citizens. After the presidential election, he rebuilt the Blue House and has been the president of this country for a few years. Even after that, he dedicated himself to normalization of the city and restoration of the national territory. If you are a citizen of South Korea, you can't help but know who Kim is. The scene then shifts to inside the Central Disaster Response Headquarters, where Kim introduces Lim to the leaders of the different guilds, and afterwards Lim explained everything about the first disaster. After Lim's explanation, Chang-soo could barely contain his excitement after hearing that there will be over 10,000 monsters. Kim Tae-jin, nicknamed Demon King, was skeptical. Han Jae-hai, nicknamed the Ice Queen, stared with a blank expression on her face, and Min Tae-woong, nicknamed the Iron Wall, was intrigued. Lim was nervous. He was in a room with the First Awakeners, a title given to the 5 strongest among the hunters who awakened first. They were the hunters who helped wipe out the monsters and stabilize South Korea's situation. But he did well to hide how nervous he was. Kim expressed to the other Awakens that he plans to declare a state of national emergency tomorrow morning, and he will do his utmost to prepare for the disaster, and he hoped the others will do the same. Tae-jin asked Kim to wait. He questioned how Kim expects them to believe such an unrealistic story. Min had a similar opinion, and he expressed that Lim looks like a scammer. They all started to bombard Kim with questions, which was beginning to annoy him, so he told them to stop, and he expressed that he was the one who verified Lim. And he explained that even if Lim is lying, then nothing bad would happen. But if Lim is telling the truth, then they could all suffer greater losses if they don't prepare. The others were slowly starting to accept the fact that they needed to prepare, however Min was still skeptical. Suddenly he moved from his chair. Lim noticed, but Min moved so fast that by the time Lim prepared to counter, Min had already grabbed hold of Lily. Lily started to skirmish in Min's hand. Min motioned his hand towards Lily's mask. He expressed that the mask has been bothering him for a while, and he asked her to stay still so he could take it off. Lily obviously refused, but this made Min question if there is a reason why Lily was wearing a mask. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, then hit the like button.